Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight's show is a roundtable with alternative researchers Sofia Smallstorm, Dave from Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole, and police officer Alex Scott. In this conversation, we will discuss how the recent Las Vegas concert appears to be a production known as an integrated capstone event, where cities and towns are funded by the federal government to stage dramatizations and play them out as real by utilizing the broad resources available within the matrix, with the largest of those resources being the complicit mainstream media. And so without further ado, here's the roundtable with Sofia, David, and Alex. Well, welcome everybody. We have a very special show this afternoon, and we're going to talk about Las Vegas. There's a lot of discussion going on about whether people died or whether people didn't die, and there's a whole plethora of different theories out there as to what went on with Las Vegas and or maybe what didn't happen. But with this show, what we'd like to do is to understand more about why these events are taking place and what is the end game. What does the goal line look like for the people that are controlling these events? And so to join me for this conversation, and it is going to be a conversation, we're going to have an open discussion, Alex Scott, Sofia Smallstorm, and Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole, David. To kick things off, Sofia, maybe if you can explain a bit about these integrated capstone events. Now, you and I have talked about this in the past. I believe a lot of people really still do not understand what an integrated capstone event is and how it plays into these events. So maybe just to kind of get the table set, if you can explain that so we can get things started on the right foot.
Sure, Mike. Thanks for having me and for hosting this discussion. I did bring out in my Unraveling Sandy Hook talk, that was quite a while ago, 2013, that these shootings are in fact Department of Homeland Security / FEMA integrated capstone events. ICE would be the abbreviation. And these events are pyramidal in structure. First of all, they are paid for by commerce and contracts. The federal government borrows money from the international banks, and that money is then rolled down throughout the country, just like there are ramps extending to all different states and cities, which have actually placed bids for events like this. These capstone exercises are all existing so that the police state can be implemented and installed in America through commerce and contracts. So cities bid for different things. There are corporate federal grants. The federal government is a corporation franchise system at this time. Almost every town everybody lives in is incorporated. The police departments are incorporated, the schools, everything, the water departments, whatever it is, the mayor's office, that's a corporate position. And so through these incorporations, corporations can only interact through contracts. And corporations, commerce, it's all about money. It's all business. So the cities actually bid for these grants, these militarization grants. They are awarded a sum of money in order to keep the grant money and qualify for more. More would enable them to accumulate better and bigger equipment, maybe a tank, maybe a SWAT team or two, more ammunition, train their police. You notice the police are now dressing in uniforms that look more and more warlike. The cross between military and police there's definitely a combining going on. And so we are seeing in America the implementation of the corporate grants from the federal government in the form of these stage shootings, where an aspect of the exercise is reported as real on television, live. And then all the different departments that have interacted in this integrated capstone event, they are trained to act however their best judgment is and their training is. Not everybody by any means has any idea that the exercise they were involved in is going to end up being a real shooting, end up going live, end up being shown on television. Each department, each agency that participates in the integrated event It's a multiple resource team conglomeration. The whole event is a pyramid. Remember your New World Order training. The capstone of the pyramid has the all-seeing eye in it. So only the people at the very top of this structured event are going to know the full story, what's really, really going down. And within each resource team, whether it's highway patrol, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a news media company, once again, all those separate teams and those divisions that are interacting in this integration of an event, they are pyramids too. And they all have a capstone. They all have people at the top. And only the people at the top know what's really going on. All the low-level people, they don't know that this exercise is going to go live, quote unquote, and that it's going to end up being a real shooting. And they are taught to act per their training and their best judgment, whatever happens. And they're under contract.
The thing that's most disturbing, Sofia, to me is, as you're taking us through this, is the depth and the degree of the coordination. One of the most obvious would be the media and how complicit it is in taking this event and then putting it out there for mass consumption as something that is organic, something that's natural, as a crazed lone gunman. It's the whole, like, Lee Harvey Oswald thing being played over again. These events are being put together for essentially the lockdown of the population and the lockdown of humanity. So let me ask this question then, because a lot of people are going to be asking and wondering, and I just want to cover it and sift through it quickly before we dig in a little deeper here. So maybe, Alex, you can help us to understand a little bit more about the event. How much of it was real, in your opinion, and how much of it was theater? In other words, some are calling it a hybrid event, which means to me that there's that camp that says that absolutely nobody died, and then there's that side of the camp that says, yeah, no, people did die, and we have a combination of real and crisis actors coming together. And this was done in order to obfuscate and to create confusion amongst the truth community and the alternative research community. So maybe, again, I don't want to major on this because I really would like to get down the path that says, why are they doing this? Taking the lead from Sofia and understanding what the end state looks like. But from your perspective and your expertise in this area, what do you think went on?
Well, first of all, I think the term hybrid event, we keep hearing that word hybrid event. I think that's a purposeful meme that has been put out because that seems to be the buzzword now is to have a hybrid event. But my background is in law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement 25 years, a detective for 15 years. So when I look at something, I'm looking at the evidence and I'm looking at the facts. Now, I'm not willing to say 100% that no one was killed during this event, but what I will say is that I've not seen any concrete evidence that anybody has been killed in this event. And the reason I say that, if we look at signs for false flags, what everyone terms as a false flag or a hoax or not happening, there's deliberate signs that we look for. We look for fake scenes, otherwise police and emergency personnel just standing around doing nothing, and we seem to always see that. You have this supposed chaos running around, and then you look, and the police and EMTs are just standing around. The doors to their ambulances aren't open. You see empty gurneys when, if you have 500 victims like in Las Vegas, then those gurneys should be filled up. Those doors should be open. They should be rushing people to hospitals, but we don't see that. We see stationary ambulances. We see no one helping the alleged wounded. And we see, much like we saw in Sandy Hook with Wayne Carver's portable mortuary tent set up, we saw the same thing in Vegas. We saw these tents set up, but we saw absolutely no victims in them. You see the FBI and other federal agencies swooping in immediately, which you normally don't see that quickly. That takes some time for the feds to come in and step in, but they're just boom, they're always there immediately. We had reports of multiple shooters. We had eyewitness accounts that contradict mainstream media. We have photos that look to have been staged and photoshopped. You have active shooter drills that supposedly, happened just right before that. And then all of a sudden now you have a live event. You have crime scene information, including a suspect, and that information is released almost immediately. I can tell you in almost every investigation, we don't immediately know who the suspect is. That usually takes time. You have to sift through the evidence, you have to look at clues, and then you find your suspect. So what we're looking for in these is what's called inference to the best explanation. So when we put all these facts together, is it more probable that people actually were killed during this event, or is it more probable that this was a staged event or a false flag or a drill gone live? And I think when we take all these things and we put them together, the evidence shows that there's more fakery here than there is realism. So that's the way I'm looking at it.
Now, should we discern between the term false flag, which to me indicates that people could have died, and a hoax? A hoax would say that, at least in my view, that nobody died. Because when we talk about false flags, we could talk about 9/11, we could talk about Oklahoma City, we could talk about the 7/7 bombings in London. From my research, people died in those events, and to me, those are false flags. So are we categorizing this as a false flag or a hoax, or are we saying, no, we're just going to discuss what we believe could be going on and then just kind of leave it open until we do some additional research and more facts come our way?
Well, that's a good point. And I think I like the term staged event better than hoax. So in my professional opinion, based upon what I've seen, I think this has been a completely contrived and staged event.
I have a question going back to what Sofia said, and then a comment about what Alex just said. Sofia, you said that it's a pyramidal. People at the top of the pyramid, they're the only ones that know, and the low-level people don't know that it's going to go live. How is it that these low-level people that are surprised that this is presented to the world as a live event, how do they not talk? Because that's what people refusing to see the reality of these fake events will say. They'll say it can't be fake. Somebody would talk. A low-level person would talk. How do you explain that?
Well, the low-level people don't know anything. They were never anywhere close to the scene. Remember all the EMTs at Sandy Hook who had to wait at the fire station around the corner? They couldn't even get access to the scene. I mean, that's all improper. Police don't go inside and pull out bodies. The EMTs are supposed to do that. And so when Alex mentioned all these people standing around and the ambulances, closed up and nobody being taken anywhere on gurneys by the official personnel, this is because those people are too low on the pyramid of their department and they're not allowed to participate. But remember how confusing it is. Remember that, or imagine how confusing it is. It must be. You're in some big, huge melee of an exercise, and there's many, many departments involved, and this whole thing has been set up over months and months and months. And suddenly there's all this confusion because you're hearing, or maybe you don't hear until after the fact, that somebody died. Most of these people are kept, I would assume, from what I've seen in videos, they're kept standing around and waiting, doing nothing real. The real action is very likely completely fictionalized, and it's put out by the mouthpieces on public television. And then the public is watched because ultimately the public is part of this pyramidal construct as well. They call it real-time documentation. So they grab somebody who witnessed something, maybe who heard blanks being fired and who saw fake blood appear at some point on somebody. And that person is then touted and held up as a witness. And that person, if they're in the event, they have to speak as though it is real time. Speak as though it really happened. Remember how confusing this has to be for everyone. You can look up integrated capstone events. There's first responder training, live shooter drills, this kind of thing. Maybe Alex has been involved in one and can tell us more. But part of it, one of the features is to be speaking and acting as if. You use your training and you report as if. So let's say it's a live shooter drill and somebody is supposed to be the shooter and the shooter shoots and other people act as though they're wounded. Then there will be a television reporter coming up and interviewing witnesses and participants in this, victims perhaps, those who survive, quote unquote. And you're supposed to speak as though this were real. And in our situation as the watching public, a lot of these artificial interviews are broadcast as though they were part of this fictitious event that was reported to have been real. I don't know if that's too confusing.
You think that there are people who are not crisis actors, who were there, who were real people, and then they are interviewed later on and they lend credence to what happened, but it's not based upon actually something happening to them. It's based upon running out of the arena or the concert area saying, hey, I heard gunshots, people were screaming, I got lucky, I'm out of here, this is what happened. In other words, they're using a mix of people who are paid crisis actors to talk about what went on, basically reading a script. And then there are those people who are not reading a script. There are people that just happen to be there and they have just fallen prey to the entire theater production.
Yeah, let's call them the support staff. There was a video that was placed on YouTube titled My Sandy Hook Adventure. And I was able to pay a visit to Sandy Hook after the fact, 2 years after. And I actually got a tour of the firehouse, and a fireman the one fireman who was attending the shiny, spiffy Sandy Hook firehouse, I asked him, I said, were you there that day? He said, yes. I said, did you see children? He said, yes, I saw children. So what does that mean? In the public's mind, that adds up to, oh, well, everything we heard about really happened. If he saw any children at all, then children must have died. The public will make the leaps, it's like the way the eye works. It's when you watch film and video, there are only so many frames per second. And your brain makes it look like everybody's moving around in real time in real life.
I think these events are very nuanced. And we know that at least since the 70s, the media has been controlled. We know that there's CIA placed in certain media outlets such as CNN, MSNBC. And I think generally the people who are interviewed in these events by the mainstream media, they're told who they are to interview. It isn't very often that they go and have a lengthy interview with someone who may have had absolutely nothing to do with this and may, quote unquote, spill the beans on something. These things are very, very controlled. They're told who to interview. And if you notice, especially in Las Vegas, so we had over 500 people shot and injured, but you always see the same 10 or 12 people interviewed out of hundreds. And I think going back to the contracts issue that Sofia was speaking about, I think that these people are picked. They're a little more in the know, and they're told, okay, this is your script. This is what you're going to do. You sign this contract, and as long as you abide by this contract, you get your $100,000 or whatever. And if you violate this contract, you can be arrested for violating your contract, and you're going to lose that money. So I think that keeps a lot of people quiet. But we don't see dozens and dozens of different people interviewed or hundreds. We see the same 10, 12 people interviewed over and over. And it's been shown that, a lot of these people go from event to event. Maybe they're disguised a little bit. They might have a mustache in one or long hair in one and not have it in the other. So I think Ole Damagard calls them the crisis actors tour group.
Yes.
These people go around.
The tour of terror.
Yeah, that's it. So, I think there's a lot of compartmentalization that goes on here, but there's very specific people that the mainstream media, I think they're told this is who you're going to interview. Don't interview these people, just interview this group of people here.
Now, Alex, Sofia kind of put something out there, and I just want to follow up on it. Have you ever participated in one of these drills?
Yeah, going back now, I've not participated in anything on this scale. But the Department of Homeland Security, going back to the grants issues, the the different states and cities apply for these Homeland Security grants, and they have people come out from the government and they train you on crisis management and teach you what to do. So yeah, this goes on all across the United States in every police department and every fire department, every EMS, where they're constantly getting this type of training because there's certain guidelines within FEMA and Department of Homeland Security in a crisis event such as this that has to be met. Certain protocols go into place, and each person has to know their role. So when the feds do come in and take over, we're all on the same page. But these are all done, like Sofia said, these are all done through contracts and grants from the federal government.
So what's the thought process of the average law enforcement person when these things take place, Alex? I mean, do you ever hear anybody say, this is not right, or what's going on here, or do they just kind of go with the flow?
Sadly, most of them go through the flow, and which is frustrating for me because as a police officer, we're trained to observe and we're trained to, kind of step back from the emotional impact of things and just focus on the facts. And that is one thing that's frustrating. I talk to a lot of people in my department, and I've kind of learned just to kind of keep my mouth shut and only talk to certain people, because people get, even police officers get upset when you think, hey, this looks like it might have been staged. And even police officers, I've even had police officers tell me, now, come on, Alex, if this was staged, it would be on the news. So you still have a lot, that cognitive dissonance is out there, and it's in every profession, even among police officers. So yeah, it becomes very frustrating.
I was recently talking to a lawyer who had a case that, let's just say, parts of that case overlapped this kind of terrain. And a police officer who had heard of her case approached her and confirmed to her, I want to say this big and loud, there's no money in peace. If we actually, as peace officers, keep the peace, our department is poor. But if we fabricate evidence, if we create scenarios where there is violence, then that violent person that we apprehended potentially represents all kinds of other violent people out there that we need to apprehend. So once we do our exercises and we have the fictional but shown as real creation of these events, or of crime, or of danger, or of terrorism, then we get grant money. This is how we get funded. We need funding. We need more equipment. We need something to do.
Mike, if you look around all over the country, and this is what I specifically write about, you'll notice that in almost every city, every day, there is some sort of event. There was an event yesterday in Baltimore where supposedly a disgruntled employee went into a marble finishing factory that he worked and shot 5 people, killed 2 of them, 3 are in intensive care. He escaped. He got into his vehicle. He drove to Maryland and went to a car dealership and shot and killed somebody there. And the media starts interviewing employees from this place, and they just, they don't act like someone who is generally upset or generally grieving. They fake cry. You see them wiping away non-existent tears. They just seem like they're acting. And these events are happening all over the country. And it's because of these grants. These police departments get these grants. Now, and a lot of times the people at the top of the police department, the chiefs of police and, a few of the higher ups know exactly what's going on, but the lower level officers may not. It's very sad to see. It's very sad to say. But I've documented cases and events all over the country where this is happening, and it even happens with things that you wouldn't even think about. I wrote a story of a girl that was supposedly attacked by an alligator. And she just calmly says, I learned at this alligator farm that, if you tap the alligator on the nose, he'll let go of your arm. And this is like a 6-year-old girl. And most 6-year-old girls, if an alligator attached was attached to her arm, she would be freaking out, but she was just very calm, and just everything just didn't seem right about it. So even, it doesn't have to be a major event. They are just making these stories up and feeding them to the public. And it's to keep people in a constant state of fear, to keep their emotions up. And it's all being done deliberately. And, if you think to yourself or family members or friends, you can probably say to yourself, I don't have any family members or friends who have been involved in any of these type of incidents, and they don't have friends of friends who have been involved in any of these type of incidents. So, if you went and spent a month just going around your city and looking for these types of things, you'd probably never find them, and your friends or family would never find them. But they're being done deliberately, Mike, just to keep us based in fear and keep us relying on the government. This has to stop. We need to enact a law. We need to be protected. So, yeah, I'm willing to give up this liberty, whatever it may be, as long as I feel a sense of safety.
Yeah, and what they do is just the pile-on effect, right? First we had all those hurricanes, then we had Vegas, and then, we have what's going on in California, because I don't believe those fires started naturally either. But let me ask, I want to get Dave into the discussion here. Dave, so we're talking about, okay, so this stuff is staged, it's orchestrated, it's engineered. So you've done a lot of research into this. So what are some of the big ticket items that you have come across that indicate, yeah, here's why it's staged?
There's so many, Mike. It's mind-boggling that people can't see through it. Most people can't see through it, and it's also mind-boggling that they make it so bad. You'd think that they could hire better actors. I've never acted. I could do way better than all of these horrible crisis actors. Imagine you're at a concert with your girlfriend, spouse, whatever, family, and they're shot. What if you were shot, Mike, and you're there with your wife? Would she scream? Would she be yelling for screaming bloody murder, for help, ambulance, screaming hysterics? 500 people were shot in 9 to 11 minutes. Amazing. And there is no screaming. If you listen to any of those audios, close your eyes, take the fake gunshots out, it sounds like you're in a busy coffee shop. There's no hysterics. There's no blood. There's no panic. There's absolutely nothing. I mean, that alone, to me, says, this is absolutely fake. I mean, I've seen, I cut the very tip of my finger off, like just the circumference of a pencil eraser of my little finger. First of all, my daughter screamed like it was the end of the world. Blood all over the house, all over the car. In the emergency room, when they took the towel off, it went all over the doctor, all over the gurney, all over the floor. I mean, it was blood everywhere, and we're not seeing any of that. I'll just run down a couple of my top things.
Yeah.
There's a video at where civilians are dragging gunshot victims into the hospital, into the lobby of the emergency room, and they're lifting them up by their legs and arms and throwing them on gurneys. There's a white floor, white walls, white sheets. There's no blood anywhere. Okay, these are, high-powered assault rifle victims that have been transported in a truck to a hospital. There's no blood anywhere. Mike Kroc, or whatever his name is, he said his buddy was shot in the chest 3 times, and he stopped the bleeding by sticking his fingers in the holes. The chances of his buddy standing there waiting for the second and third bullet to go through without any recoil on that gun, I think like a fraction of an eighth of an inch of a move of that gun from the recoil would move the bullet 10 feet at that distance. It's impossible scenarios like that. The taxi cab video, everyone's like, well, look at this taxi cab, this woman. If you watch that video with a discerning eye and take the emotion out of it, you can see that it's completely staged. When the taxi cab driver drives on the main boulevard, they're at the light, all of a sudden people start running out of the venue and jump in the car. First, the people that jumped in the car, they're like, broken leg. They're like, oh, okay, broken leg. And then they don't talk about the broken leg. They want to be brought to their hospital. But while they're talking about that, if you look outside the car, you'll see groups of crisis actors run into the middle of the street and then lay down and go into what I call the crisis actor pose, or the hoax pose, where, you got someone laying down, somebody on one knee, but they ran from the field to lay down in the middle of one of the boulevards in Las Vegas. I mean, That alone makes absolutely no sense. Mike Kroc, his story was that he was rescuing victims. He was taking gunshot victims, throwing them over a fence, okay? And then he knew that at venues like this that the worker trucks leave their keys in the car, and the first pickup truck he found had the keys in it, and he took a pile of people to the hospital. Then he drove back to the venue, took another pile of people to the hospital. Then he drove back to the venue again. Now the police have set up a perimeter, and they're like, oh, no, you can't come in. And he convinced them to let him come in a third time and pick up more people.
I think this is the guy that said he piled 24 bodies into a Silverado.
Or something, and then he also opened the gate, and some of them fell out on the way to the hospital or something like that. I mean, the stories are are ridiculous, Mike. And then if you just look at it's always portrait video instead of landscape video, because that shows you very less detail, and it's always running, moving around. And when the shooting's going on and everyone's hovering down, there's people laughing. There's three girls together literally putting their hands over their mouths to stop themselves from laughing. When you're under gunshot, Alex, have you ever been under fire?
I have not been under fire, no, thankfully.
Well, just imagine you're under fire. Are you going to even crack a smile?
Well, here's the thing that most people don't realize. I've been in traumatic and serious events. Luckily, I've never been in a gunfight. But when you're in a traumatic event like that, your body and your mind and just the human nature, your fine motor skills go out the window. The only thing that you're thinking about is your own survival. Or if you have a child or a spouse there, you're thinking about their survival. You aren't, as cold as it may seem, you don't care about anybody else. Your mind goes into what's called an OODA loop. And that means that you've lost all fine motor skills. All you want to do is survive. So you aren't going to stop and drag other people that you do not know. Your primary concern is for your safety and for the safety of your loved ones if they happen to be with you. So the fact that these people, and that's another thing we always hear, there's all these stories about all these heroes. Oh, everybody's a hero. Well, in a real event, you wouldn't have that. You may have, if once the gunfire settled down, you may have a few people that want to come back and help, but those are usually people who do have prior law enforcement experience or EMT experience or former military. They aren't just your run-of-the-mill people, because those people want to get the hell out of there and get to safety. That's all they're concerned about.
So that's exactly it. They want to get the hell out of there. But if you watch the video during the rallies of the fake gunfire, everyone's hovering down, except there's a few people, security guards standing up, no concern. There's a couple of people standing up, but everyone's hovering down. Then the gun stops for 5 or 10 or 15 seconds before the next round. Don't you think out of 22,000 people, some people would get up and trample people to get out of there? Absolutely.
Yeah,
there's no way everybody would stay down, but that was the cue at that time. Stay down, try not to laugh.
So, David, are you saying that everybody at the concert was on the payroll?
So here's my thing. There's supposedly 22,000 people there. If you look before at any video before the gunshot starts, you'll see people standing on the field, and look around them. Look past, you'll see that there's 6 feet in front of them. There's 4 feet to the side of them. There's people, a couple feet behind them. That's not 22,000 people. 22,000 people, you are crotch to rear end packed in there. This is just my opinion, is that all of the people on the floor were involved in this drill, and perhaps there was some real concert goers in the surrounding stands, so they can be evacuated first. Because one thing they don't want, if there was real shooting, or they really made it sound like there was shooting and there was a panic, you could have a lot of dead people. You could have 22,000 people trying to get out exit gates. You could have a stampede, and that would kill a lot of people. So I think they did it in stages. I think if there were any real concert goers there, they were on the perimeters and they were let out first. There's also two videos that show when the shooting started and when the Jason Aldean ran off stage. And then there's an outer perimeter start of the same time, the same music, and the people started running before the gunshots. They took their cue a little early and they started running. Because they were cued to run. And then, of course, there's a guy filming there, right behind a car. It's nonsense. Also, 22,000 people, it's got to be at least 20,000 cell phones. There should be tens of thousands of pictures. We have very, very few pictures.
That's always a phenomenon there that, it's all of these people and you wind up with, I think it was Alex saying before, you see a loop of 10 videos being played over and over again when you should have hundreds, if not thousands of.
How about the fact that this is a concert venue in Las Vegas, which probably has more CCTV cameras than the Pentagon, which obviously only had one on 9/11. There's no video, there's no CCTV footage of anything around that concert, no security footage, no footage in the casino. You know where they put the elevators to the towers in those hotels is in the middle of the casino because they want you walking in and out of the casino. So he would have to walk through a casino where you're on at least 6 cameras at any moment. There's no video anywhere from anything that happened, which is a telltale sign of these fake events.
Well, let me play devil's advocate, and I'll open this up to whoever would like to answer the question. But why would they not kill somebody? I'll phrase it this way. Again, 9/11, I believe people died on 9/11. I believe people died with the Oklahoma City bombing. I believe people died the 7/7 bombings in London. They send your kids off to war, right? So they don't have any issue with killing people.
I disagree with that, Mike. George Bush, how many people did he kill during the Gulf War? The answer is 0. He convinced other people to kill people.
But that's my point, Dave. My point being is that I'm playing devil's advocate saying that perhaps people did die. I'm a little reserved on this thing because I know that they do kill people.
Mike, I would like to present then that if that is the case, then we should see wrongful death lawsuits against that venue, because with the kind of security and the number of guns that this guy supposedly carried in under the noses of everybody in the lobby of that hotel and that he concealed in his room, there would be wrongful death lawsuits. I mean, in 9/11, there were no subrogation lawsuits. I tried bringing this up in the discussion at the time, but nobody seemed interested. A subrogation lawsuit is a suit that it has to do with cross-complaining against others. So if it was true that the construction of the building was faulty, then you turn around and you sue the people who built the building. In general construction defect law, there's tons of subrogation. There's the first complaint, and then there's the cross complaints going in every direction against the drywall people, against the people who did sheet metal, the people who did the slab, everybody is involved, and everybody has to defend themselves and say, not I. I wasn't the one who made this whole complex fail, right? No subrogation in 9/11, none. And where are the wrongful death lawsuits? We should see them. There should be people who are absolutely outraged that a family member was eliminated from the face of the earth because of the laxity at this hotel.
We know that 15 days prior to this event that a company called Crowds on Demand issued an ad wanting crisis actors and people to stage a drill in Las Vegas. So let's say that there were actual concert goers there, that this was an actual concert. And let's say you have maybe 100, 200 crisis actors from Crowds on Demand. If you're going to have real shooting, the shooters aren't going to know who's a crisis actor and who's not. And they aren't going to take the chance of possibly hitting one of these crisis actors for reasons, that Sophia's just explained. Because, there's going to be, like she said, there's going to be outrage. There's going to be people filing lawsuits. There's going to be, litigation after litigation. And they aren't, they aren't going to want to take that chance because they know that this is a staged event and that there are crisis actors here from a company who has signed a contract saying, and a lot of these people may have been told, we're going to have this drill, nobody's going to get hurt. And then that voids their contract. If they're hurt, if they're shot or they're killed, then that just adds more grounds for a lawsuit to come back, sue the venue, sue Crowds on Demand. And that's just not something that they're going to tolerate.
I would love to see a copy of a contract from one of these companies that brings these crisis actors together. I would love to see the terms and conditions of that contract.
Yeah, me too.
Let's talk a little bit about the audio of the gunshots. Now, initially when it came out, there were those in the truth community saying that the shots were being played over the loudspeaker system. And then later on, we were getting information that there were multiple, quote unquote, shooters. So how do you think this went down? Did they have multiple shooters, shooting blanks, not live rounds? Or was this something that was pre-recorded and played over the sound system at the concert arena?
All of the above, I think, is possible. We don't know exactly, obviously, but listening to the audio, you had a lot of gun blasts that sounded like they were right at the venue itself, which could have been coming from loudspeakers. And you had shots being fired that sounded like they were from a distance, but not from the hotel. And as Dave was saying, if shots were being fired from 400 yards away, they would be very faint if you could even hear them at all, especially with the music going.
And 32 stories up. So a shot fired along the ground, the sound wave is going to travel along the ground. A shot fired from up in the air, it disperses in a 360-degree radius, and it disperses much faster. So I don't think that you would hear an echo, but it would be way in the distance. The other thing is, Mike, using the sound system there and maybe even some hidden speakers with today's audio, computerized audio effects, you can fake gunshots coming from a distance. You put them on the left side, put them on the right side. You can fake that. And I also think that all of the stories about additional a second shooter, a third shooter, the story that a woman said there was shooting coming from gate 7, I think, or from somewhere else. And she went to the FBI, and the FBI told her to shut up or she's going to be arrested. I think that's all obfuscation to make people, if you're thinking about a second shooter, therefore there's a first shooter.
What about the girl that was put a video up on YouTube, and then they claimed that she was found dead? I guess she was talking about the event, and she had a totally different storyline. Do you think that was real, or do you believe that was part of a psyop?
Pure psyop.
Are you talking about the girl that was whose husband left at like 4:30 in the morning, and then she was killed like 8:30 when the mother came to pick up the baby and found her dead? Yeah, I tend to agree with Dave. I think that they're putting different stories out to send us down different rabbit holes, to give us different breadcrumbs. She put this Facebook post up there, and in her Facebook post, it's very lengthy, it's very descriptive, and she talks about people being struck by the bullets and people dying around her. But if you notice, anybody who puts out any so-called truth video on YouTube is doing their damnedest to take these down as soon as they're getting put up, especially if they're telling truth. But this girl's Facebook was allowed to be, as far as I know, I think it's still up. They haven't taken it down. So that's very telling when, you've got a different story than the official narrative that's put up on Facebook or on YouTube, and they allow it to stay, but other people will put other videos up and they're almost immediately taken down.
Sofia, let me ask you this, because you and I talk about this. We kind of, every once in a while offline, we talk about this reality that we're residing in. I mean, where is this going? This is just unbelievable that you and I discussed this the other day, in fact, that we have to wake up in the morning and we have to be confronted with this stuff on almost a weekly basis, whether it be these staged events or whether it be these hurricanes or the folks in California dealing with the fires out there. It's just a perpetual motion machine of doom and gloom and just plowing over the psyche of the American population and across the world, because what happens here, it's going to leak out to the rest of the world. So what are your thoughts about where are they going with this, and what is the end state? What's it going to look like 10 years from now?
I think to start with, they want to change the human being into some kind of humanoid prototype or type that is devoid of any kind of inspiration, joy, emotion. They want to robotize us as much as possible. And if they surround us with calamity and then they tell us that they have to increasingly regulate our lives and impose restrictions on us because there are a number of us who are clearly out of control, inflicting all this violence and harm on everyone else, then we will become resigned, we will lose our spirits, and we will shuffle from day to day and try to be on our best behavior, be model citizens, and not create any waves. So number one, there is already an eradication of human spirit. And number two, they want surveillance. They want us to be maximally transparent. I mean, literally, this backscatter technology, this is an imaging term. They want to be able to see literally into us. They want to be able to watch us to the nth degree and have us willingly expose ourselves in every imaginable way to them.
Why even have it so that you have everybody essentially contained? Why just not do away with people? It'd just be a whole lot easier. And your answer might be, well, Mike, that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, they still need workers. They still need, quote unquote, the slave class. And one comment that I will make, if you look at mass shootings on a grand scale, they're very, very rare. Usually when you have a murder or you have a killing, it's a crime of passion or it's premeditated against someone. Usually someone that's killed is killed by someone they know. It's very, very rare where you have a mass killing like this because our psyche is such that human beings, we except for the true psychopaths and sociopaths, we don't like to kill. People always say, the human being is monstrous and they're murderous. Well, we're really not, because if we really enjoyed killing, then we wouldn't have soldiers coming back with PTSD, and we wouldn't have people on all the psychotropic medicine. So killings like this are very, very rare. And I read a statistic the other day. They were comparing this mass shooting, that they say that this is the worst mass shooting in history. And then they go down the list. So they have Las Vegas at 58. They have the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting at 50. Then they have the Sandy Hook murders at 26. They have Aurora, Colorado, Tucson, Arizona, and they go down the list. But we've been able to prove that all of these were staged. So even the statistics that they give us aren't correct.
Hey, one other thing I wanted to point out, when you're talking about are they shooting blanks, were there, the sound effects, where's the sound coming from? I'm leaning towards there wasn't even any sound effects, and those were inserted afterwards, because if you watch any of the videos, all of them, when people are crouched down, the shooting will stop, it'll start again. Nobody flinches. Nobody makes a move reacting to the current round of bullets. They're completely, playing the role, laying down, smiling, giggling, but nobody flinches. If I clap my hands, people flinch.
Do you think, David, that these participants or these crisis actors, do they understand or know afterwards that this is going to be a full-blown media event, or do you think that they're just not that smart, that they're just getting their pay, getting a check, and then going home?
That part is the hardest part to reconcile for me, because if there's so many people that didn't think anything was going to happen, they were having a drill, and then all of a sudden it's portrayed real, I don't think you really can control that unless, of course, these people are under contract for, let's say they got caught with drugs or something worse and they're going to jail for the rest of their life. And they got a deal. Hey, here's a deal. Sign the contract. Play this role. If you ever say anything, it gets reinstated and you go to jail. Those people are not going to talk. But if you have, 50, 100 or more low-level people that were doing a drill and it went live and it's a surprise to them, I don't know how you keep that quiet.
Anybody out there that's listening that can get their hands on one of these contracts or one of these companies that pulls these crisis actors together, forward it to one of us. We'd love to see the terms and conditions. I mentioned that before. I would really like to see what those contracts say.
Here's another thing I want to put out there, and most people just won't take the time to look. Have you heard of image matrix, Mike? You've seen it, where they make fake people that look real.
Yes.
There's a video that's been going around. It's over 10 years old, of a girl being interviewed at a desk, and she looks pretty darn real, and that's what they released to the public 10 years ago. And I've seen some videos where you have crowds of people that are all fake, and they're reacting independently. I've seen evidence of some of these interviews, some of these people, that they're not real people. There's fake people there. They're mixing in virtual reality, augmented reality with real crisis actors, with maybe some innocent bystanders. They're mixing it up to a point where it's going to be harder and harder for us to tell what is real.
You see, it's so hard for so many people to get their heads wrapped around this, David, because what we're talking about is something that is just, it's so deep and it's so broad and it encompasses so much that's why people have a hard time with this, right? Now think about what we're saying. We're talking about CGI, and we're talking about crisis actors, and we're talking about the media is complicit, and we're talking about the police departments understand this, or at least at the higher levels, that the politicians are in on it. And we just go right down the line.
Occam's razor says that there was a real shooting. This is way too complex. Occam's razor says that Arabs with box cutters crash planes into the towers.
That's why when we talk about this stuff, that's why I wanted to have this conversation, is because when you go down this path, if you're not doing the research and you're not doing the homework, we sound like a bunch of Fruit Loops. Okay, we sound like a bunch of tinfoil hat wearers, that this can't possibly happen because just too many people would be involved in too many areas, and somebody somewhere is going to blow the whistle. So the question becomes, why doesn't somebody blow the whistle? I mean, I know the short answer is, well, they're under contract, and if they breach that contract, bad things are going to happen. But isn't there anybody out there that has a conscience? Isn't there anybody out there that says, fuck the contract, I'm going to talk about this isn't right?
Maybe there are. Maybe those are the few people that do die. Maybe this Jose Campos guy, the drama with him, don't know what to make of it yet. Maybe he was having a hard time with this and was going to speak out, and they had to alter the story there, and they finally had him on Ellen. You should look at the breakdown of that. It's
I didn't see that. Yeah.
Well, Ellen has contracts. There's at that hotel. I think it's at that hotel, or at least in Vegas. There's Ellen slot machines, so she's already in bed with the casinos, and she didn't ask any real questions. That entire interview, if you just look at him, Alex, you're a police officer. What did you think of his reaction in that video?
Yeah, it was very strange. They made a point to say that Jesus Campos, he's giving the Ellen interview, but this is the only interview he's going to do. He's not going to do any more interviews because this is just too traumatic for him. And, I watched that interview 3 or 4 times, and, there was a lot of things that I noticed in there. First of all, I'm not necessarily convinced that is the same Jesus Campos as we've seen in other photographs. In other photographs of him, he has 5 distinct moles on his face, and he has 2 pretty big ones down on the left side of his chin, and those weren't visible during the Ellen interview. Now, I'm not saying that that they're using doubles. I don't know for sure. I'm just speculating. It could be possible. It's been done before, but his demeanor was just all wrong. You could tell by his body language he was unsure of himself. He acted scared. He was reluctant. He could have possibly even been given like a Valium or some other sort of benzodiazepine, to make him appear more relaxed and, so he wouldn't be chatty, so to speak. And then he had this other guy with him, this Stephen Schruck, who was supposed to be an engineer in the Mandalay Bay that he saved because when he went up to investigate on the 32nd floor, he just happened to be on the 31st floor. He went out and he noticed that one of the doors was jammed, so he had to call an engineer, and this Schruck person was the engineer. So he appeared with Campos on this Ellen interview, but if you look at him, he looked to be more of a handler for Campos. There were 3 points in that video where Campos would be talking, and you would see Schruck put his hand on Campos's back and rub his back. And to most people, that I'm sure that looked like, well, he's just consoling his friend because he's upset. But to me, that was definitely a message that he was given to him, either saying, okay, you said too much, or, don't say any more, or, you're doing good. But I think this guy was a handler. I really doubt if he's an actual engineer. But if you look at Campos while he's giving the interview, I mean, he has a complete lack of eye contact with Ellen, which is very telling. This is often a sign that a person is being untruthful or evasive. It can also indicate a sense of shame or guilt on their part. They know that they've done something wrong. And he's obviously aware that this whole event is a sham. So he's most likely guilty for his participation. At the same time, he looks like he's being coerced into playing a role. There were several times during the interview that he kept closing his eyes. And again, this is deceptive behavior. When people close their eyes, oftentimes they're trying to recall details that are not truthful. A lot of times when people are telling the truth, they may pause and look up in either direction because that's because they're trying to recall truthful events. But if they keep closing their eyes, they know what they're saying is a lie. And it's also subconsciously saying, I know I'm telling a lie, so I can't look this person in the eye. So they close their eyes. And I also think that interview was taken and shot with several takes. One thing I noticed that in most of Ellen's shows, whenever they have something on, like an emotional event, they'll show the audience because they like to show the audience reaction because it gives a human element to it. And the whole time that she's interviewing these two, they never show a shot of the audience, which I thought was pretty telling. And then at the end of the interview, Ellen explains that, we offered to give these two some money, but they said that they didn't want to accept any money, but we want to give them some gifts. And so they tell us that Schruck is a big Indianapolis Colts fan. So they're going to fly him to Indianapolis and they're going to let him meet the team. And he was all excited and very thankful. And then they tell us that Campos is an Oakland Raiders fan. So when the Raiders moved to Las Vegas for the 2018 season, we've given you season tickets. And we're also going to present you with this $25,000 check on your behalf to the GoFundMe victims account. And he takes it, but he looks like he's completely embarrassed. He doesn't look joyed or grateful or anything. He's like, oh, man, I can't believe that I'm doing this. This is so bad. How did I get wrapped into this? Quid pro quo. Yeah.
Right. So that leaves us, that's a very interesting analysis, Alex. So that kind of segues into, if you could talk about the sheriff. We talked about this before the show started. I had mentioned that when he first came onto the scene and he was doing press conferences, he looked very, very confident, very self-assured. And later on, he looked like he was going to have a nervous breakdown. What do you think is taking place there?
Yeah, I agree. I think I think like Campos, he's being coerced. He's saying things and doing things that he doesn't want to do. But again, he's the sheriff of the county, and he is under, as Sofia has said, he is under a contract. He is obligated to come out there because the sheriff, the county sheriff, is the head law enforcement of that particular area. So he has a lot of power, but he's also under contract. So he's very nervous. And also, they keep changing the narrative. So each time he goes out, he's like, oh no, I have to say this. I know that, I'm changing it again. I don't want to do this. And then he has the two FBI handlers standing behind him, watching him like a hawk. And if you watch those press conferences, I mean, they don't take their eyes off him because they're making sure that he's saying the exact right thing. Somebody asked a question, one of the media asked a question, and he started to answer, and you hear the FBI guy behind him whisper, "Don't go there."
Yeah.
So he immediately changes the subject. But yeah, I think he's under a lot of pressure.
Sofia, Alex had mentioned before that these types of events are very, very rare. So do you think that any of this stuff is real? I was thinking as you were talking, I remember the North Hollywood shootout back in 1997, where there were these two guys and they were heavily armed and they were wearing bulletproof vests and body armor and all that stuff. Do you guys remember that back in 1997? And they got into this big shootout with the LA Police Department. Just going back to that for a second, I know, Sofia, you're out in California. I don't know if this rings a bell or if you have an opinion on it. Was that staged also? Trying to go back in time a little bit so that people can understand that this is not like a new phenomenon. So if I can go back to 1997 and show that perhaps the same thing was going down back then this is something that they've been doing for a very long time.
Well, you said that the events are very rare, but I don't quite understand what you meant by that. If you mean cases in which there really is a mad shooter who is shooting people.
Yes. It was going back to what Alex had said that,
yeah. Well, I would guess that that's pretty rare. I mean, there are serious consequences to something like that. And now we're seeing sprees. There are sprees of these events, sprees. And when you start looking at them closely, things absolutely don't add up. I would say that to call them untidy is an understatement. But the untidiness creates a lot of argument, and it keeps the truth seekers very, very busy. And they don't need a lot of tidiness in terms of the details. Why did it take 72 minutes for the police to break into Paddock's room? Well, I bet you because the room wasn't set up properly, and they were delayed in setting it up. And they set it up all wrong by putting bullet casings on top of blood. I mean, whoever set it up was not very smart. But I think that's why there was such a long delay, because that room just wasn't ready.
Yeah, so this is just, this gets deeper and deeper as we venture into this conversation.
Hey, Mike, can I go off on another tangent of this?
Yes, absolutely, Alex.
We've talked, and I know that you've talked in other shows about predictive programming. And how there's a vast amount of evidence. There's dozens, probably hundreds of different television shows and movies where the illusion of something happening on 9/11 and planes crashing into towers was going to happen. You had The Simpsons, and you had in the movie The Matrix, when you looked at Neo's passport, his his expiration date was 9/11/2001. So you have all these predictive programs, and I don't know if you know this or not, but on ABC there is a new series called 10 Days in the Valley, and the premise of this series is that there's the lead character is a female, and she's a screenwriter and movie and documentary producer, and she's making this cop show drama. This premiered on October 1st, which was the same night as the shooting. And at 10 minutes into the episode, the lead character is talking to another character who comes to her home. She's frantically trying to write a script for the next day, and he's looking at her script board of other scenes that she's written, and he makes the comment. He looks at the board and he says, "Oh, bloodbath scene at the casino. That's a hot choice. I bet that's going to be expensive to do." So that line was said at the same exact time that the first shots were reported shot in Las Vegas. Then in that same episode, at the very beginning, again, this was on October 1st, the lead character, she's sitting and she's typing, and she's wearing a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers t-shirt. And on October 2nd is when we found out that Tom Petty had supposedly died, even though there were other people saying that, no, he actually died on October 1st, but it was just reported on the 2nd. So again, you have so many levels and so many facets to all these events, and there's so much symbolism, there's so much pre-programming and numerology and everything in all these events that, it becomes difficult to go through and analyze every single thing because there's so much.
Well, I think O.J. Simpson also got out of jail, right? About that time?
Yep, he did.
And you guys know about the school shooting that happened mid-September, and there's one of the photos that was going around on the mainstream media was a group of supposedly parents, in a cordoned off area, not looking too concerned, and the woman is on the phone with her sweatpants said Las Vegas. And a YouTuber called Anaconda Malt Liquor, I think is the name of his channel, he said, he called it Damagarding. He said, keep an eye out for Vegas. 2 weeks later, there we are. So I think it's just part of the game that they play by putting these clues in there. They're laughing at us.
Oh, yeah, they leave calling cards. There's no doubt about it. So why don't you guys talk about, while we're on the topic of clues and symbols and all that stuff, let's talk about Paddock's last name. What does that mean?
So the name Stephen in numerology, that codes to 33, and 33 is a big is a big number as far as the Masons are concerned. If you're a 33rd degree Freemason, you're at the very top of Freemasons. So much if you look at it codes to 33. But then his last name, Paddock, the actual Webster's definition of paddock is an enclosed area used specifically for pasturing or exercising animals. And then the example of a sentence that they use is, quote, led the sheep into the paddock. So, the sheep being, of course, the people who were shot and killed. So, yeah, there's so much nuance. There's so much symbology and everything in all these events once you really start digging deep into it.
Yeah, and I've mentioned to folks that they like to leave their numbers, as you have mentioned, Alex. The shots came from the 32nd floor, an obvious reference to the 32nd degree of Freemasonry. But the number 10 was very prominent with this Vegas event, and the number 10 is very powerful in the esoteric and the occult. Just quickly, I'll go through this real quick, and I'll put this in the slideshow. So initially, they said that 59 people were killed, and at least 527 others were injured in the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. When you add the 59 and the 527 together, the number of people killed and the number injured, well, all those numbers, 5 plus 9 plus 5 plus 2 plus 7 equals 28, 2 plus 8 equals 10. When we talk about Paddock's age, he was 64. 6 plus 4 is 10. It was the event took place at the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival or Theater. Well, 9 plus 1 is 10. The investigators found 23 firearms in Paddock's room at the Mandalay Bay Resort. Well, 2 times 3 is 6. Of course, 6 is very, very prominent. 6 is a number that's used in these events to depict deception and what is referred to as enchantment. In other words, to pull you in. And then there were 19 more guns at his home, 1 plus 9 being 10. So the point I'm trying to make, not to belabor this, is that the symbolism, Paddock's last name, the numbers, this is all part of the equation. And of course, a lot of people don't understand this. And for those of us that do, can really start to piece these things together and understand that nothing is as it seems, that there is more that we need to look at. There's more research, and these events are orchestrated and they're staged. So, let me ask this question, because I know we've been at this now for about a little over an hour and a half, and we'll just go to each one of the folks on the line here and get their perspective. Do you think that the American people, or even the world, but we'll just stick with the American population. Sofia, I'll start with you. Do you think they're waking up? Do you think they're getting this, or are we essentially talking to ourselves and preaching to the choir?
No, Mike. I think the sheep are going in the paddock. The sheep are so in trance already, and they are so addicted to transparency in so many ways. They put their whole life up on Facebook. They post pictures of the food they eat, and I can't even imagine what they're going to be posting pictures of in a few years. But they're in the paddock. They are addicted to their screens, and they don't care about the real world they're in as long as they can have a la-la land and a la-la life through their screens. That's it.
David, how about yourself? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are I am seeing some people waking up and scratching their head, and it gives me great encouragement. But when I really go out and look at the number of people that are waking up, sure, it's a lot to add to the truth community, but if you look at the truth community, it's such a small percentage of the overall community. I have a friend, used to be lived around me, grew up with him, and he moved down south. And so we're just kind of friends on Facebook and occasionally see each other on Facebook. We'll make a comment. And he commented on a Vegas post I put, basically saying, he's a fireman and he's an EMS worker. And he's basically saying, this all could be real, and he just can't see. He still believes 9/11 was real and Sandy Hook was real and Boston was real. No matter what I show him, he cannot see it. And his comment on a posting I put up about the fires the other day was, I watched 2 minutes of this and it's not true. And he goes, I don't need to watch the rest. It's all wrong. And he'll never wake up. And it really made me see how a lot of the population is that way, because to wake up to all of the stuff means that you have to destroy the world that you created around you that you believe is there to protect you. Mothers especially create a safe world for their children, and everybody creates a belief system in what the world is. The government is here to protect us. But when you find out the polar opposite is true, it's hard for people to accept.
No, absolutely true. I've had similar situations happen to me with people that I know. No matter what you try to present to them, they're never going to see it. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, it's destroying their reality, because to wake up, it's literally, you have to go through the death process. You have to, get upset, and then you have to grieve and let it go, and then finally you can become empowered by knowing the truth. The truth may be scary, but the truth is way better than just being a sheep in the paddock, as Sofia puts it.
Alex, are you seeing any movement? Are you seeing any glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel?
Not really. You do have people that are becoming awake, but it's such a trickle that it really doesn't make a difference. And I've also noticed that a lot of people will wake up and they'll say, well, yeah, this is probably true, but then they just stop. They don't do any further research because, they may think, oh, yeah, this looks staged. But then when something else comes along, they can't believe it because they have we have our certain worldview. And, most people are just trying to get through their work week. They're trying to feed their families. They're working 2 or 3 jobs because the economy sucks. And they want to go to the football game or the basketball game. And it's very discouraging because you'll see people who will wait 3 days in line for the new iPhone. But they won't go outside their comfort zone to even look at these events. I've had people tell me, when I try to tell them about certain events or certain things that, well, though that's not true. Well, how do you know it's not true? Well, I just do. And I'll ask them, have you done any research on this other than what you've seen on the news? Well, I don't need to. And,
that's exactly right.
Yeah. And I've made the comment. I said, you do realize that condemnation without any investigation is the highest form of ignorance. And, well, if you want to get shut down quick, tell somebody that, because then they think that you're calling them stupid. When you're not, they're just ignorant of these subjects. Ignorance does not mean stupidity. It just means that you are uneducated on a particular subject. But, going back to what I said, even the police officers that I work with, the vast majority of them, they don't want to hear this because they can't believe it. And, these are people who are other detectives who are used to going in and putting together clues and looking at evidence and making arrests and solving crimes. But, they won't put that same practice and those critical thinking skills to work when it comes to these events.
Alex, how are you able to do what you're doing? As an example, being on this show and talking about this, are you shunned by your department?
I'm not necessarily shunned by the department as a whole, but yeah, among the circles that I work in, I'm known as the tin hat wearing conspiracy theorist. Or when something comes up, people say, well, I suppose you think that's fake too, because you think everything's fake. And that's another thing. It becomes the name calling. You think everything's fake. So
I used to say not everything, but now I really have a hard time coming up with something that's real. Another thing I wanted to say earlier is that people in the truth community, we've seen all of these hoaxes. We've gone through the details, and over time, we're like, okay, this is definitely a hoax. But what everyone is panicking about is that there's going to be a real shooting event, a real mass casualty event. We're going to call it a hoax, and then they're going to stick it in our faces and make us look like fools. So that fear is what I believe is holding a lot of people from seeing that Vegas, in my opinion, I have not seen any proof of any real deaths yet. I don't want to say I'm hoping that people died, but, if people died, I'd like to see some proof, and I have not seen anything yet.
Yeah, nobody's hoping for anybody to die. Right?
That's what I say to people. When people fight me, I go, oh, you hope that 50 people died. You're hoping, and I just ridicule them that way.
As Sofia once told me, that should be good news.
Yeah.
It's good news. Nobody died. Isn't that wonderful?
Alex,
Nobody died.
in the statement you use, condemnation sentence, I've altered it a little bit. I actually got it from somebody else. Don't know who it was, so whoever you are, thanks. Condemnation without investigation is the admission of your indoctrination.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, I tell folks all the time, anything worth knowing is a lie. That's where I've landed with this thing. I mean, there are things that are true, but they're not important. But anything that like history and all that stuff and your science and so on, I mean, all that stuff is just, littered with lies and deception. It's But let me ask this question. I'm going to end it with this question. I'll go around the table. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to circle back at the very end to ask Sofia just to touch on the integrated capstone event one more time so that we end the show where we began it to ensure that people kind of understand it and we close the loop. But now we've all kind of concluded that, we don't have perhaps this mass awakening. We have what Max Egan refers to as an awareness. So we have a heightened awareness within, certain pockets of the population. So, Sofia, what keeps you motivated to keep doing what you're doing? Because you just keep going. You're still doing your newsletters. You and I do the shows. You do other shows. What keeps you from saying, you know what, I'm just going to ride into the sunset and enjoy my life and, the heck with all this?
There's no sunset to ride into. I want to just quickly circle back to the last question, not to thwart this question at all. But if there is an event that is a real mass casualty event, that's not an accident of some kind involving a bus or a plane or something, meaning one of these shootings where there's a mass casualty scenario, all we have to do is look at the evidence. That's what we do with every single one of them. And if there's evidence, then it will convince us that this was a true, real mass casualty event. But so far, the evidence has been pretty pathetic. That's what I will say. We are not people who jump to conclusions. We are willing to look carefully at everything we can get our fingers on. That's what we do. We don't just broad brush everything. But at this point, given the frequency of these things, I'll just call them things that happen, one tends to roll one's eyes and say, well, let's see if this one really has any evidence under it, right?
Yes.
So your question was what motivates me? Like I said, there is no sunset to ride into. And that's part of the plan. They don't want you planning for the future. They don't want you creating a new startup and trying to find investment or trying to, build a new house unless it's off the grid and you're trying to shelter yourself. But there's nowhere to really go except to get through each day, perform something of value that day for yourself and of value to others and for others, and go to the next day. And that's all I really do.
David, how about yourself and what keeps you going?
That is a great question, Mike. It's the truth. I cannot, once you see the truth, it's like the scene in the Matrix, with red pill, blue pill. Once you see it, you can't go back. And when I woke up to 9/11, which was at the beginning of my awakening, I couldn't go back. And, I've grown a thick skin. There's people out there that will refuse to ever see. But the few people that I wake up, sometimes I wake up lots of people. I get emails, I get messages from people saying, hey, you woke me up, 3 years ago or 5 years ago. And that keeps me going. Just just a couple people that tell me that. And I know that for everyone that tells you, there's 100 that don't tell you. So that keeps me going. The hope that, if people wake up, we could change this world. I also stand by the belief that your reality is, up to you. You create your own reality. And, I'm a very happy person, in this crazy mixed up world. I ask myself, would I like to be like those people that are surrounding me? When I go out in public and I see these people that have no idea they're being sprayed, no idea about 5G network, no idea about false flag shootings at 9/11. And would I want to be that person? Absolutely not. And so my goal is to give other people that opportunity to see the world the way it is and perhaps change it.
Alex, how about you?
Well, I think similar to David, once you wake up, it becomes hard to go back to sleep because you don't want to, because now your eyes are open. So I think part of it is my inquisitive and investigative nature. I like to get to the bottom of things. So, when I see one of these events that happen now, instead of saying, oh, that's terrible, I just automatically assume that it didn't happen. And then I work, in the opposite way. I want to find out if this didn't happen, then show me the clues that it didn't. Show me evidence, show me dead bodies, show me actual injured persons. And that's a bit of a cynical way to be, but, it just keeps happening over and over and over again. And then, you think too, we have lost in this country, and it's been gradual, but we have lost so many of the freedoms that we used to have. And there are, this might sound bad coming from a law enforcement person saying, but there are so many laws. You can't do anything anymore. Personally, I don't care if somebody's not wearing their freaking seatbelt. That's, if you're over 18, if you're an adult, you should have that opportunity to decide that for yourself, whether you want to wear a seatbelt. We legislate everything, and we have laws, which aren't really laws, actually. They're corporate statutes by contract. That's a whole nother subject. But piggybacking on what Sofia said. But, there used to be a time in this country where you paid for your property, and your property was yours. It was called an allodial contract, right. And once you signed your allodial contract and you paid for your property, it was yours. Nobody could come onto it. Nobody could take it. Now, you get a mortgage, you pay your house off, and you don't truly own it, because try saying I own my house, but I'm not going to pay my property taxes. They will come and take that house. And even on your mortgage, it doesn't refer to you as the owner of the property. It lists you as a tenant. You're just taking care of that property for the state. So, we've lost so many of our freedoms, and, I just want my freedoms back. I just want to be able, if I'm not harming someone, if I'm not damaging somebody else's property, that's the main thing. But there is no more natural constitutional law anymore. And I get so tired of people saying, well, we live in a democracy. And it's like, well, we may live in a democracy now, but that's not what the intent was.
Right.
The intent was, a constitutional republic, and, it's been said before, a democracy is just two wolves and a sheep deciding what they're going to have for dinner. So, yeah, I'm very passionate about this subject, and I'm very passionate when it comes to people's civil liberties. I'm the civil liberties police officer. I don't like stopping people anymore. I don't like giving tickets anymore. You usually have to be doing something pretty egregious for me to give you a ticket, because, I tell people that just for 99% of the public, just being stopped by a police officer is stressful. People don't like the police. They don't like to be stopped by the police. And I hear so many police officers saying, well, you're acting awful nervous. And I'm thinking, yeah, they're nervous. You just pulled them over. These are law-abiding citizens. They just go about their day, So I'm sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent.
No. I get it. And you're absolutely right. And it's the whole mentality that some in law enforcement have. It's I've heard them say, I am the law, barking at people, and it's this intimidation factor, and it shouldn't be there. I come from a family of law enforcement, and, my father didn't behave that way. And it was a long time ago when he was walking a beat, and then he was a detective. But my dad was a family guy, and he wanted to treat people right.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, well, to kind of wrap it up here, Sofia, if you can just encapsulate again, talking about the integrated capstone event and what it means with regard to these events. It's the actual reason why these events take place.
Well, people need to remember that everything that transpires now with the corporatization of our world transpires by way of contracts, and we are in a commercial setting. Everything is commerce. Every single thing you do that involves something like your insurance or your driver's license or your lease or whatever it is, paying your credit card, you have signed a contract or agreed to a contract, to the terms of a contract. Look at what happens on the internet. Every 5 minutes, they're flashing some terms that you have to agree to, right?
Right.
So just to operate your computer and different programs, you have to agree to these terms. These are all contractual terms. So all these events are done by contract, and money is paid. And I would say if you want to know where that money is, go and look in the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report of every city. And you would have to have access to the CAFR, and you would have to know what that particular grant or a series of grants was filed under. They might have project names for all we know, right? These might be coded projects.
This is money that is earmarked for something very specific.
Right. Cities receive grants to, for instance, build a community park. This is part of Agenda 21. There are community parks. There are flashy train stations. There are all kinds of new constructions going on all over the place. And the city has to use that grant money for that project. And that grant money has to be set aside, and it is put in a fund. It is put in reserve so that it isn't wasted or spent erroneously on other projects and programs. So the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, people say, this city or that city claims that they're bankrupt, but look at their CAFR. It's got millions of dollars in it. And these cities are not squirreling money away. They're not even lying to us. Cities collect money from fees, from licensing, from parking meters, from, there will be fines and penalties that are assessed to residents for various reasons. There will be city taxes and whatnot, but the CAFR is a whole different thing. The CAFR does contain large sums of money because cities have created projects to build something or to start something. And those projects, those monies have to be saved to be used on those projects. So I would guess that the money for these DHS integrated capstone events may be found in those CAFRs. But we would have to look. We would have to know what we were looking for. And we have to start seeing these shootings as those kinds of arrangements. Somebody is benefiting. That's how the police state is being installed around us on these pretexts. And every time there's an exercise and one can, quote unquote, prove that something has transpired that is of consequence and danger to the public at large, then that city will qualify for more grant money for upgrades in its services and equipment. And this is how the police state and the New World Order are being established and hammered down around us as we live.
I'm afraid that you're absolutely right. And so hopefully folks that are listening to the show, Sofia, this will get them thinking a little bit and start to understand this and put this in a very different context and perhaps that they're used to putting it in. And, money talks, and that's the world that has been created, and that's the world that so many people buy into. And, it's all about money. So in any case, I want to thank everybody for coming on the show. It was a great discussion. I know it was a difficult discussion to have because the audience is going to be very much divided on this. And so what I'm going to ask the audience to do is just chew on what it is that we talked about here. All of the people on the show, Sofia, Alex, and David, are critical thinkers. They're free thinkers and processing through this. That's all we're doing, and just having a discussion. And hopefully, if we have more of this type of discourse in the country, we're going to be a lot better off at the end of the day. So with that, what I'll do is I'll close out, guys and gals, and I'll put all of your information down in the show notes as far as your websites and your YouTube channels and your blogs and the such, and we'll wrap it up there. And if you just want to stick around a little bit, what we can do maybe is just talk a little bit after the show. So again, thank you so much for being on the show, and you guys are welcome back anytime. And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.